There's a special election going on in Alabama currently to fill Jeff Sessions' open seat. And as you all know, Jeff Sessions became Trump's attorney general. So we have a race between Doug Jones, a centrist Democrat, and Roy Moore, a right-wing extremist Republican he's just a lunatic. I don't know how else to describe Roy Moore. But currently, Joe Biden has been in Alabama stumping for Doug Jones. And in trying to rally the base and galvanize them to get them to come out and vote for Doug Jones, we're getting a snapshot as to the type of campaign Joe Biden will probably run in 2020. And it's not pretty. So The Hill explains, stumping for Democratic Senate nominee Doug Jones, Biden said the former U.S. attorney grasps fairness when it comes to the issue of taxes. Doug understands about tax fairness, Biden told the crowd. Guys, the wealthy are as patriotic as the poor. I know Bernie doesn't like me saying that, but they are. So clearly, this is an attempt by Joe Biden to pander to people in Alabama by invoking Bernie Sanders. He's really trying to separate Doug Jones from the Bernie wing of the party and saying, look, I know that you guys are more conservative. Doug Jones is not like Bernie Sanders. Doug Jones, he actually might support Donald Trump's tax reform that just gives tax cuts to the wealthy. And in even saying something so stupid that, I know Bernie doesn't like it when I say this, but the rich are just as patriotic as the poor. You wouldn't say something like that unless you're trying to pander to people who think that tax cuts for the rich are beneficial. But what Joe Biden doesn't realize is that he's not going to get conservatives in Alabama to come out and support Doug Jones. They're already going to vote for Roy Moore. But what he's not going to do in saying something idiotic like that is encourage left-wingers in Alabama to come out and vote for Doug Jones, because why would they come out and vote for Doug Jones if Roy Moore is going to do the same thing policy-wise as Roy Moore? So you need to give them a reason to vote for you, especially in these really red states. But Joe Biden, he's pandering, and he thinks that this is what's going to help Doug Jones get elected. But if anything, Joe Biden is hurting Doug Jones here. Now, the thing about Joe Biden is that he doesn't like progressives. He thinks that, people like Bernie Sanders, they're just too firebrand and they don't like compromise. And that's something that Joe Biden looks down upon. He does think that you should be compromising. He said that today, it takes more courage to engage in compromise to achieve consensus on both sides. And distancing himself gently from his own side, he noted that the left came after me because I didn't insist on everything in raising taxes on the wealthy. But you see, Joe Biden, you did compromise. You compromised when you had a supermajority and you and Obama gave us the Affordable Care Act. Now, that's better than nothing, but when you had the chance to actually implement single payer, why didn't you at least give it a try? I mean, you started at a public option and then we got negotiated down to the Affordable Care Act. So you gave the Republicans what they wanted. You codified their healthcare plan into law. I mean, the ACA, that's something that was thought up by the Heritage Foundation. So you can't tell us that it really takes bravery to compromise in this partisan political climate. Democrats, they don't get to use that term compromise because they don't know what it means. To Democrats, it just means roll over and die, give the Republicans everything that they want. That's what compromise means to Democrats. So the point here is to imply that Doug Jones would be willing to compromise with Republicans. And this is a way to hopefully get people in this conservative state to come out and vote for Doug Jones over Roy Moore. But in another attempt to pander, Joe Biden stated, I've been around so long, I worked with James Eastland, said Biden, referring to a segregationist senator from Mississippi. Even in the days when I got there, the Democratic Party still had 7 or 8 old-fashioned Democratic segregationists. You'd get up and you'd argue like the devil with them. Then you'd go down and have lunch for dinner together. The political system worked. We were divided on issues, but the political system worked. Well, first of all, you're not acknowledging the presence of money in politics in this current political climate and how Republicans and Democrats, there's this hyper partisanship because, one, the Republican Party has moved so far to the right, but two, it's because you have competing special interests who are lobbying and basically threatening to withhold campaign contributions if they don't get their legislative agenda passed. So that's why you really see this hyperpartisanship. And the fact that you got along with segregationists, that's not anything you want to boast about. You should have told them to go fuck themselves. If you're honestly trying to tell me that you're proud that Democrats worked with people in their own party that were segregationists, who thought that people of color were not good enough to share water fountains with white people, then that's embarrassing. This is a level of pandering that's ridiculous, because he's in Alabama, so he's thinking, well, maybe if there's some people who are in favor of segregation still in 2017, maybe we'll get them to come over and support Doug Jones. But they're not going to support Doug Jones. They know you're pandering, and we all know you're pandering. And overall, the point in talking about Joe Biden is because I think that out of all the 2020 presidential candidates, he's the one that poses the biggest threat to Bernie Sanders. And what he's doing here in pandering to people in Alabama, he's giving us a snapshot as to the shitty campaign that he's going to run in 2020. We don't like disingenuous politicians. We know you're pandering. We know that you're trying to do and say everything possible to get Doug Jones elected, but by moving to the right, by making him be more centrist, you are handicapping his campaign, because you are communicating to left-wing voters, potential left-wing voters who might otherwise come out to support Doug Jones in Alabama, that maybe they should stay home because he's not going to be much different than the Republican. But Doug Jones is running against Roy Moore. He literally thinks that homosexuality should be illegal. Can you not differentiate yourself by saying that you're not an extremist lunatic like him? I just don't understand how Democrats think pandering is going to be an effective political strategy. You've pandered, and it's failed you every single time in the South and in red states. Why don't you just try something new? Try being a progressive. We had Randall Woodfin win in a deep red state. He's now the mayor. He's a progressive. He was endorsed by Our Revolution. And guess what? He won. But Democrats continue to move to the right because they think that's going to be electorally viable. And really, this isn't about Doug Jones in my mind, because probably he's not going to win. He's not going to win. He's just not a very inspiring candidate. And this is Alabama. It is a deep red state. So you need your base more than ever here. And the Democratic Party has chosen to go after conservative voters instead of their own left-wing base. So we know exactly what type of campaign Joe Biden is going to run here. A campaign just like Hillary Clinton, where you pander to different sets of voters at different times. But that's not going to work. We don't need another Hillary Clinton. We need another Bernie Sanders. And that's why I want to talk about this, because Joe Biden scares me. In 2016, if you ran, him and Hillary probably would have split the votes between establishment voters, people who support the establishment, and that would have allowed Bernie Sanders to coast to victory, even in a rigged primary. But in 2016, if you just have all of the former Hillary Clinton voters and pro-establishment voters lining up behind Joe Biden, he's actually a threat to Bernie Sanders, which is scary to me. So we've got to watch him, and we don't need to anticipate what type of campaign he's going to be running, because we're already seeing it right now. He's going to tell you one thing and tell other voters another thing. He's not going to be genuine.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.